pretty much I'm an open book when it comes to anything that I'm involved in.
John is a level 3 sex offender from Crawford County. Of course, that's not his real name. His identity has been masked for the sake of his victim. Several years ago, John was convicted of sexually assaulting a young boy and was required to register as a sex offender.
I have to be real cautious on how I live my day-to-day life. Where I go to church, what do I do during the day, that kind of stuff. I have to limit what I do.
John was assessed as a level 3 sex offender, which requires the community to be notified of who he is and where he's living, and also keeps him from being near certain places like schools. John says he went through years of therapy, and police say so far he stays compliant with registry laws some offenders resist or completely ignore.
I feel that if a sex offender will abide by those rules and do what he's supposed to, then they're not going to have any problems.
When sex offenders move to Arkansas or get out of a state prison, they're required to come to this assessment center in Pine Bluff, where they're tested to determine how big a risk they could be to the community.
I come into this room here.
The process starts with a questionnaire. Offenders are asked about their sexual and criminal history and told to give their first responses to certain words or phrases. They're then interviewed about their answers and crime. If officials think they're not telling the truth, they administer a polygraph test.
Obviously, many times they're not as forthcoming as we would like for them to be.
Director Sherry Flynn has been with the assessment center since it started in 1999. She says they've made a lot of improvements since they first began, but are constantly finding ways to better evaluate sex offenders.
When we began in September of 1999, there were already 1,800 registered sex offenders, and the projection was that there would be 500 sex offenders added to the registry every year. In fact, there have been consistently around 1,000 a year.
Even if an offender immediately starts the process after their conviction, it takes about 3 months from start to finish. Flynn says while they're always looking for ways to make it more efficient, they'll never compromise the thoroughness of their program.
Sex offender management in Arkansas is better than it has ever been. And for the first time in the 23-plus years that I've been working with sex offenders, we are all on the same page and communicating with one another.
Having lived with the system for several years, John says he can see how important the assessment process is to keeping the public, as well as offenders like himself, safe.
Sometimes I think that the law is harsh, but when you look at it from an overall perspective, you realize that this is a harsh crime, and that these rules are set in place to not only protect you, but also to protect the public as well.
For 5 News Most Wanted, I'm Russell Jones.